publisher. GREE is an enormous company that also publishes games, and I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to get the big publisher perspective on what it's like to work on publishing games in today's marketplace. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Ying from GREE to talk about that.
Hi, my name is Ying. I head up the publishing and partnerships team here at GREE. And for this morning, what we're going to be discussing is various publishing models and how they can be successful in the mobile space and some of the challenges that you run into. And rather than kind of me come up here and give a presentation on how GREE works, we thought it'd be better if we just had an actual case study of one of the partners that GREE actually works with. And so to my right, with me on this panel are Jory from GREE and Karen from IUGO, and I'll let them both introduce themselves as well as the product they work on.
Hello, I'm Karen from IUGO. I'm a producer at IUGO, and I've worked there for about 4 years. IUGO has been making mobile games for about 10 years. We've done games like Animal Academy, Implode, and Knights and Dragons that we worked on with GREE.
And I'm Jory PEARSALL. I'm a director of product at GREE. I manage our second-party game studio. I was one of the earlier additions to our US office, and prior to GREE, I was at Google for a number of years working on some of the early Android device launches and Google+.
You want to talk a little bit about Knights and Dragons?
Yeah, so I'll give a quick intro to the project that we're going to be talking about here, Knights and Dragons. Our icon is right over there on the top. So basically, Knights and Dragons is a casual RPG that's a free-to-play game available on iOS and Android. We collaboratively developed it with IUGO here, and it has reached top 20 grossing on both iOS and Android. We actually announced recently that it's generating over $1 million a month on iOS currently, and growing at a very healthy clip.
Okay, so in terms of jumping into the questions, I think what's particularly relevant to the folks here, from a publisher perspective, there are certain criteria and characteristics that publishers look for in the developers that they're looking to partner with. Maybe, Jory, you can go through a little bit. What are the things that IUGO brought to the table that made them appealing to GREE?
Yeah, so I was really excited for the opportunity to work with IUGO because, as Karen was mentioning, they have a very long track record of mobile game development, history of releasing critically acclaimed games, oftentimes featured by Apple, games that players love, and over that time period, they've developed a really strong development toolkit as well as a very strong production team, which I was very happy to work with. And most of all, potentially most importantly, it's clear they have a passion for making great games, not just average games, but really going above and beyond to make a product that players will love.
And then on the flip side, certainly you'll meet a lot of different mobile publishers today. There are a lot of folks jumping into this space. Karen, from IUGO's perspective, what are the things that you guys were looking for from a publisher, and what made GREE appealing?
The things that made us pretty excited to work with GREE are the expertise they brought in areas that we don't currently have the resources in. That's areas like user acquisition, business intelligence, monetization best practices, and live ops, like the events that we run, our weekly events, like the epic bosses and PvP tournaments, as well as the sales that we run. So that was the items that GREE brought to IUGO.
Okay. So there's the promise up front of what the publisher can bring, what the developer can bring to the table, but ultimately the success of the project, a lot is about the working relationship between the two teams. Maybe, Jory, you can talk to a little bit, how do the teams work together on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think one thing that was relatively unique about our model is that we decided to be deeply collaborative from day one. So we really tried to set up the project as if it was, two teams or one combined team across two offices really working together in a collaborative fashion. So how that played out is we established a lot of communication channels very early on. So we'd have daily stand-ups across both of our teams together. Set up multiple Skype groups to make sure that we had fast, easy communication channels to be in touch regularly throughout the day, ping questions back and forth. Also a set of project management tools so that we could be very open and transparent about what we were doing. As opposed to kind of trying to get everything perfect and then doing a grand reveal, we decided it'd be much better to be transparent, work together, be humble, admit when we knew things, when we didn't know things, so we could actually leverage each other's strengths effectively. We really relied on IUGO for a lot of game design, bringing the game to life, but then we're able to kind of leverage our shared knowledge across our successful games in terms of feature design, feature development, and setting up a strong live ops schedule.
Okay. Along those veins, one of the biggest challenges from publishers and developers working together is that they aren't co-located. So internal teams, generally, you're in the same place. It's easy to communicate. Karen, can you talk to, based on this relationship, how are you guys able to overcome some of the not being co-located challenges?
Yeah, I think we identified early on that would be the big challenge, is not being geographically in the same location. Based on past experiences and just human nature, we kind of know that an us versus them kind of mentality can start to develop. So I think early on we did two things. We established a common ground, and that was the knowledge that together we wanted to work for creating the best game possible. And then the second thing is the strong communication that Jory alluded to. We got to know each other very well. It almost got to the point where I felt like I communicated more frequently with Jory's team than even some, the other teams in the office that I wasn't working as closely with. So the daily communication as well as the Skype channels made us feel like we were, close coworkers working together. So I think that that establishing that common ground enabled us to negotiate things such as schedules by deciding what was best for the product.
Okay. And at the end of the day, one of the key evaluators of whether a partnership is successful is how the game actually does. And so as Jory mentioned before, the game is grossing over $1 million on iOS per month now. It's continuing to grow on Android and iOS. Can you talk about, from the relationship perspective, how are the teams able to work together to really improve the metrics of the game to drive that revenue growth?
So one thing that was very important to us from day one was to take a very analytics-driven approach to game design. So we actually set out, even before our major launch, we entered a beta process where we would launch in test markets and set up a very metrics-driven approach to improving the game there. So we were able to determine, through our retention rates and our, revenue generated, exactly what the lifetime value of our users are, and then, basically figure out the right marketing mix to best launch the game. But in order to actually get to the point where we could market the game effectively, we had to improve the performance across certain areas. So just as one example, during the beta period, we used our GREE analytics system to basically set up a tutorial completion funnel. So we could track every user through each step of the tutorial and then see exactly where the dropout points were. So once we identified that, our two teams could work together to determine, okay, how can we improve this experience, cut out steps that are dropping off users, maybe shorten or adjust different steps. But then also, how do we make it a more compelling experience? So not just making a data-driven decision, but a data-informed decision. We know we need to get more players through the tutorial to improve our long-term retention. So let's give them extra incentives to do it. Let's make the first-time player experience easier and more compelling so that they actually stick around longer. So just by making those iterations and optimizations, we were able to improve our tutorial completion rate by 50%, which allowed us to be in a much, much stronger position to launch the game for GA. Since then, we take a lot of emphasis in terms of running events in our games and also working together to set up a backlog of new features based on what's going to have the largest impact for the product. So we'll sit down as a team and basically go over a set of features that we want to develop and decide, okay, what impact on ARPDAU or retention or engagement are we expecting this feature to bring? And how long is it actually going to take to develop? And then we can have that negotiation to kind of understand what the best use of our shared time and effort would be. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think running live ops for a game is very challenging. I think it's almost as challenging or more so than actually delivering the beta release. So that was one of the big challenges that we encountered, and through like our communication, our good communication and the common ground that we had established, we were able to work through the backlog items and determine like the priority items to get into the game, as well as like negotiate which events were to run when and which would be the best for the product.
So throughout the whole project, the two teams have worked together pretty extensively. Through those interactions, Karen, could you maybe call out a few surprises that came to the GREE, to the IUGO team?
A few surprises. I can't even think of one. No, I can't even really think of one. And actually, I think one of the reasons is that like early on we did establish like the good communication, and so we kind of worked through any issues that came up, and spoke very frankly about anything that came up. So I can't say that there were too many surprises that come to mind, really.
Okay, no problem. So hopefully, kind of through this panel and through the charting positions and grossing that Knights and Dragons has shown. We've demonstrated at GREE that publishing models can work in mobile. I think ultimately it comes down to the model that's out there. And at GREE, we believe that we have struck upon a model that has been successful and will continue to be successful. And this model is largely based on a significant investment in terms of equity, minority equity with the company, where really the risk and the benefits are shared between the publisher and the developer. So really, what we're looking for here is partners that we can work with who are really strong dev teams, looking for a strong publisher who can bring to the table not just financial resources, but also knowledge in terms of how to monetize, how to retain, and really just a close partnership to build titles that ultimately, the goal is to hit a top 10, top 25 grossing game together. So for folks who are interested in chatting with us more, I'll be hanging around afterwards. Also, you can come over to the GREE booth. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience? I have one. I always have one. So you talked about taking an equity stake in the company that you've been publishing with. That's kind of a change in model from, say, 4 or 5 years ago. Even 10 years ago, big publishers very rarely took a minority stake in a development company, instead funded project by project. Why do you choose that approach?
So I think certainly publishing models and investment models in mobile gaming and social gaming are changing, and there's no set model that's been proven through a long track record to be successful. The reason why we focused on this and why we believe it can be successful is really unlike previous, let's say, console games or PC games where it was launch and kind of forget about it. It wasn't really critical for the two partners to have a sustained long-term relationship. Whereas in mobile games, because so much of the revenue and so much of the success of the title is dependent on the ongoing live ops, you really do need to have that really close bond where the incentives of the two parties are really aligned. And so by actually investing in the team, you're really signaling to the developer, both through your money and through your intentions, that you're kind of in it for the long haul with them. And that's why our intention for all of our partners that we work with is not just launch one game and then kind of see you later. It's work together on one game, fully share the knowledge that GREE has established from Japan as well as internal teams here, and then continue to strengthen the relationship and launch games in the future.
And Karen, when you guys first started talking to GREE about doing a publishing relationship, was that the kind of relationship you were looking for, or was that kind of something that evolved through the conversation that you had with GREE about the type of relationship you wanted to build in the future?
I believe that was the type of relationship we were looking for. We knew that we were good at developing games, but there's certain areas that GREE brought to the table, like user acquisition, monetization, business intelligence, monetization best practices, and that is exactly things that we've been learning from them.
Gotcha. And of the audience, I did this in the last session. I wanted to get a sense for this session as well. How many people in the audience here are working for developers that are actively looking for a publishing partnership? I know you are. So hold on, hang on. I gotta look at this. Hang on. So Hands way up, way up. All right, put your hand down if you would never sell a piece of your company in exchange for a publishing relationship. You would sell a piece of your company for a publisher relationship? All right. Sounds like it's a tough road. There's only a few out there that are actually interested in that kind of deal.
So I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of different models out there, and really as a developer, I'd encourage you to talk to all the folks, right? Talk to us, talk to the other parties, get an understanding of what people are bringing to the table and what they're asking for and why it might not make sense for everyone. But really, ultimately, keep an eye on the top grossing charts, which ultimately, as a developer, if you're looking to build a business, that's kind of what's important. And look at what type of partnership models have been able to drive games up to the top grossing. And I think we've done it with Knights and Dragons. It may be the case that other publishers are able to do it, but ultimately, I'd say you want to see a track record of success from the publisher you're working with. And if you're not up for, our model, understandable, but it's one option.
I could just add from the kind of product perspective as well. The goal for my team, as a second-party product team, is really to have the best batting average possible, right? So it's important for us that we choose the right projects and focus on what's really going to win. So, I'm very comfortable doing less games, but making sure that we take it to the next level because we have very ambitious goals.
Well, and I would also say that as far as collaborative publisher-developer relationships, the relationship that you two have is pretty special. I mean, I think that having done publishing for a number of years in my own career, it's unusual to find the product managers for publishers and developers that were willing to even be in the same room together after their product's done. So, Jim, Jory, Karen, thank you very much for coming here to talk today. Applause.
Thanks.
Oh my God.
All right, give me a